Today's question on repurposing content is, should you ever repost old episodes? How do you reuse that content? This is what we're diving into today, so let's get right to it. Hey y'all, Crystal here today, and I am back with another question about repurposing podcast content. If you watched our other video about the questions that I've gotten about repurposing podcast content, then you will already be familiar with this topic that I love so much, because I think if you're going to go through all the effort to create an amazing piece of content, then I want you to get the most out of it that you can. So again, today's question comes from Catherine, and she says, should you ever repost old episodes? How do you reuse that piece of content? So here is my opinion, and this is strictly what it is. I want you to take it with a grain of salt, take it however it's going to work for you and your content, but I am not a fan of taking a previously aired episode and just putting it like saying, oh, we don't have time for another episode, so here's this one, enjoy. And there's a reason, okay? There is a total method to the madness. As a loyal fan and a loyal listener of many podcasts, I get a little disappointed when this happens. I've listened to podcasts where they do this and they're like, oh, we're on a break, so we decided to re-air this episode. I don't like it because I've already heard all of their other incredible pieces of content, so it kind of feels like deja vu. And I think, man, I could have just went back and listened to this episode instead of hearing it here, and I've already heard it, and it's not something I want to listen to again. Again, this is just my consuming habits as a podcast listener. Now, from a host perspective, I get it. Things come up. One of your kids gets sick. You have to take care of a loved one. You have to go out of town suddenly, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't have time to create a brand new podcast episode. There are many opportunities for you to reuse old episodes in this particular way. But like I said, from a listener standpoint, it's not my favorite. I get a little disappointed. So what are some of your other options? What I like to do instead is look at your old episodes and see which ones are performing the best. So I have a great example of this. I love the show Office Ladies. It's all about The Office. You can check it out here, and I'm going to link to it below. But what I like to do is look at their podcast, right? I have an episode on the Proffitt Podcast. This is my show. And I did a case study on The Office Ladies. Before it launched, when it was launching, I did a whole, it's totally nerdy. If you want to go check it out, I highly recommend. It's just a case study on how they launched their show and why I think it was so successful from the very beginning. I'm thinking about doing more case studies like this because I think it's really interesting. This is the most downloaded episode of my entire podcast. So in looking at that, I have to say, well, what is it? What is it about this podcast that people are drawn to? Is it the fact that I went on a super big deep dive? I did research that took me a while. It took me a few days to do the research that I did to create this episode. Was it the fact that I shared a lot of my own pop culture references and how much I love this show? So I could take a perspective of this top downloaded episode and ask, how can I spin that into another piece of content? And just so you know, if your original performing piece of content was 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, your next piece of content doesn't have to be that long. I don't like to be boxed into rules when it comes to time and format, and everything has to be the same way every single time. It's your show. Do what you want with it. I do agree that there should be a cadence and a regular, consistent day that you publish your episodes, but not every episode has to be exactly the same. So if you're in a bind and you're like, I really want to use this old piece of content, but I don't really want to re-air the same thing, ask yourself, how can I put a fresh spin on this? How can I come at it from a new angle or a fresh perspective? Or is there a way that I can reuse old pieces of content and piece them together to create something new? These are all going to differ from podcast to podcast, but I wanted to give you a few ideas on how you could repurpose your content. But that's all I have for you today. So let me know your other questions about repurposing content. We're going to continue this series and record a few more questions about repurposing content, and one of those could be yours. So if you have questions, put them in the comments below. But that's all I have for you today. So make sure you hit the thumbs up if you found this helpful and subscribe below. That way you don't miss our future videos all about podcasting and running your online business. Make sure you check out these other videos right here, all about podcasting and running your online business. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.